All right, good evening, everybody. I can call this meeting to order. The official time is 6:04. Have you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Item C, adjustments in the agenda.
Wouldn't call it an adjustment, just to let the board know that under new business, item 1, consideration of teacher nomination. Unfortunately, we do not have one for you tonight, so we can just not do that. So that leaves you with one item on the agenda.
I would like to make a motion, Jen.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to move the discussion of our meeting location from our workshop meeting to our actual board meeting, so we can take a vote on that.
Okay. I'll second that. Elizabeth?
Yep.
I think the appropriate thing for that would be for the board to continue to discuss that. That's a significant item adjustment to put on an agenda at the last minute. You should discuss it in your workshop and then maybe put it on next week's agenda.
But it was supposed to be on last
Right.
week's agenda.
Right. It's already
So I
kind
think
of.
there's been time to think and consider.
Workshop.
Right, and we postponed it to the last workshop, which the last workshop, we went long with the training, so we didn't get to it in the last
So you
workshop.
moved it to this workshop tonight.
I see no reason why we can't have, I mean, this is a 5-minute discussion. There's no reason why we can't discuss it and vote on it tonight.
Could be more than a 5-minute discussion.
Could be, but we only have one thing on the agenda.
Exactly. And I see no reason why this couldn't be talked about and settled tonight. This isn't, you know. And the fact is, it's already been delayed enough.
Any further discussion?
Who was the second? I heard
Elizabeth.
I heard
It was-
two of
it
them.
was-
Okay.
Yeah.
Elizabeth. All those in favor? Opposed? Passes. So we'll add to, what do we have?
I reckon putting it after, you'll add
Discussion.
J2 and make it J3. Under new business, F.
F, yeah, I was
On the
like.
regular agenda, it's J. F.
Yeah, okay, so discussion of consideration of winter sports would go to F1,
Yep.
and then that to F2. Alrighty. Item D, communications and correspondence.
I have none for this meeting.
None. Alright. And E, public participation. Are there any comments yet?
No, not yet, but we should probably remind folks that it's a different email address
Yes,
than.
yep, absolutely. So the public participation for tonight's meetings and going forward will be now our board member Elizabeth Alteri. That's going to be at E. Alteri, which is spelled ALTERI, at ellsworthschools.org. Those submitting comments are asked to provide their full name. And we'll go back to that when we get into these items. All right. So item F, number 1 is discussion and consideration of winter sports.
And as board members know, similar to what happened back in the fall, there's been a wait for the agencies in Augusta to come forth with recommendations for a winter sports season for Maine high schools. That information was completed, I believe, on November 9th. You were sent copies of the Community Sports Guidance and all of the Maine Principals Association guidelines that were developed by the Maine Principals Association, Maine Department of Health and Human Services, Maine CDC, with some input from the Maine DOE, the Maine School Superintendents Association, which is the association I belong to, Maine School Boards Association, which is the one you all belong to. And this is the product that has come out from it. What we have here tonight is Principal Clifford from the high school, athletic director, athletic administrator Ross from high school, and joining us by Zoom, Principal Gabinelli from the middle school. and Assistant Principal Athletic Administrator Wood from the middle school. We'll talk about their recommendations for the upcoming season, and we'll let you know that the administrators, once that information came out, we all did meet and convene and spend a lot of time on these guidelines. And I think, as Josh is probably going to say, and Travis probably will too, these are the guidelines that are in place right now. They could change at a moment's notice. I don't know if any of you saw the news last night, but DHHS Commissioner Lambrou was on one of the newscasts last night talking about their agency looking at what's happening in other states. There'll be a presentation tonight with a recommendation, but please know that that recommendation, and you may want to think about your recommendation or your vote on what that recommendation, carry a contingency that if the guidelines change, what we do changes.
So if I could actually start and go back to the fall just for 2 minutes. I just wanted to kind of give the board a recap of how the fall season went, and then move forward with the winter. So as you know, we started very late, about 4 weeks late. But I just want to give you a recap on each sport. So cross country was able to run in 4 meets. And then the state qualifier, which this year was a little different. It was in Bangor, and it was only the Penobscot Valley Conference. But we were able to host 2 meets right in Ellsworth, which was kind of nice. We did not have anybody qualify for the state meet, but after the state meet, we, as a league, decided to offer one more race. Why not? Give the kids one more opportunity to run. So they were able to go to that race and finish the season out that way. Football was able to hold practices. We were able to introduce the sport of football to a lot of new students coming out for football for the first time, so it was a great opportunity for them. They were able to play in 2 6v6 touch football games. We started out the first half with flags and realized very quickly that it was actually more dangerous with the flags than it was just to touch somebody. There was actually some tackling happening, so from a safety standpoint, we got rid of the flags and it was okay just a one-hand touch. For volleyball, as you know, we had to move outside, and they've moved that season also to March. But we were able to purchase 2 outdoor nets with some COVID money, and we'll have those nets going on for the future, and we'll be able to use those for school events and PE outside. We had almost 30 girls come out for volleyball, which was huge. Awesome. And so we were up on the softball field, and we also hosted 3 outdoor matches with Bucksport, GSA, and Brewer. And I will tell you that for the last match against GSA, I believe it was right towards the end of October. And a lot of the girls were wearing hoodies, and so the hands were in the pockets, and then the ball was coming towards them. They'd pull them out of the pockets, hit it, put it back in their pockets. So it was definitely time to call it a season, and they were grateful for that. Fall cheering, we only had 3 interested girls come out for fall cheering, but they had several practices and just were never able to kind of get everybody together to go to a home event. So they, again, learned some skills and things with cheering, but they had that opportunity. Boys soccer was able to play in 9 games. They finished with a record of 4 wins, 2 losses, and 3 ties. Had some very close games. A lot of games were close, and very memorable games, especially one with GSA where they came back to tie towards the end of the game. In girls soccer, had a great season. A lot of seniors on this year's girls soccer team. They played in 9 games. Finished with a record of 5 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie. And some memorable games for them were holding off Brewer in a very cold evening at Brewer. 7 o'clock game, which in the end of October is very dark and very cold. But they were able to beat them and coming back to tie Bucksport in their last game. And then finally, golf was a very quick season. It was about a 3-week season. Once they got going, we were able to play in 6 regular season matches. Hosted 3 of them up at the Lucerne Inn golf course. And we had one student, Nate Smith, qualify for the state championship. So that's something that, in my time, I don't believe we've had anybody qualify for the state, so it was very neat to see Nate go out that way as a senior. So that's the fall season. If there's any questions, I'll take those. If not, I'll move into winter.
Has the state championship happened yet for golf?
The state championship happened for golf. They do it in the fall.
Yeah.
It happened on Columbus Day weekend, Saturday.
Yeah.
And so he went to Natanis and Augusta and had a great time. Didn't
Uh-huh.
play the best, but had a great experience.
Good.
So, yes.
Okay. How did the kids handle the differences in how their sport seasons were?
I'll tell you what, I talked to many of them at the end of the season, and they were grateful. They were very grateful for something. You know, they had something to look forward to every day, go to practice. I will tell you that it took a lot of reminders at the beginning and throughout the season from coaches. Put your face covering on. We're not doing vigorous exercise right now. Those sort of things. Stay spaced out while we're not doing vigorous exercising. And but the students were very, very grateful for something, especially at the end of August when they thought there was going to be nothing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
How did the coaches feel about the precautions? Were the coaches comfortable with how this went down, and with, you know, are they comfortable then moving forward?
Yeah, you know, the fall coaches, I'm very grateful for them, like holding on, not knowing what was going to happen, and then taking all these different procedures and really having to manage them and roll them out. And they were great with it. They were fine with it. You know, because again, at the end of the day, it was providing students an opportunity to play. So they were fine. Yeah. Yep.
Josh, are there any statistics that the MPA has if there were any cases related to any of the sports in the fall?
There was an AD in the state, I forget where, that was collecting that information. I don't believe he's done anything with it or released it yet. But if I do see that, I can certainly share it with you.
Okay, thank you.
But I know he was collecting it.
All right,
But
great.
just as if there was a positive case and if that was spread amongst the athletic, you know, competition field. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
And how did the community do as far as not being able to be spectators? I know there were some live videos. And
Yeah, and in the fall it was a little different, because in the fall we were allowed 100 outdoors. So the way we did that is by a ticketing system. So generally for most soccer games, we were able to give kids 2, sometimes 3 tickets. I know there were some students that maybe only needed 1, so they were, you know, giving it to a friend, here, take these 2. And it worked out fine. Again, because games were generally towards the end of October, it was colder or wet out even. There wasn't a lot of people in the stands.
people weren't as excited.
Yeah, no. But, you know, the same thing, we've never had to, at a cross-country meet, you know, have only 2 or 3 teams there and then know how many kids are coming, only allow 1 or 2 parents for our students to come watch. You know, I will say that there are teams like MDI that doesn't have a home cross-country course. So we were able to, like, those parents were never able to see their student run. So we were able to at least provide them an opportunity twice to see their student run. And the live streaming worked out great. I had Jen Berry and Franklin Brown, both who work with the school department, and they, you know, did the live stream at all the events. And I will say using the YouTube channel was great, because you can sit at home, pull it up on your smart TV, watch from there, and that's our plan for the winter too.
Awesome.
So.
Did we get the number of subscribers we needed for
We
it to be
did,
free?
we did, yeah. And honestly, like, I promoted it so we could get over that. We didn't need that because we use a streaming box.
Oh, okay.
But where we did need it was to stream from the softball field where the volleyball matches were. I had to use a hotspot. So that's when we needed the 1,000. So it was great once we got to outdoor volleyball matches that we had more than 1,000.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing going forward, if I'm thinking in the future, if you know, we have students that are attending regional meets or things like that, where if I'm attending, I can pull it up on my phone and start streaming from the YouTube channel. So there's a lot of opportunities that will come with, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And how many subscribers did we end up with?
We're at 1,200 right now.
Good.
Some add, some drop.
Right, well, and depending on the sports season, you may see another influx once.
Yep. Well, I think you're gonna find, especially in the winter, a lot of teams streaming, that you'll have a lot of away fans that will subscribe now, because they wanna know, so. Yep. So jumping into the winter, I've given you all a handout. These come kind of directly from the MPA and the state agencies that looked over the guidelines. These were the guidelines, as Mr. Higgins said a couple weeks ago. So just a couple of general guidelines. Spectators are not allowed at all home and away events per the MPA guidelines and the governor's executive order. That comes from the 50 number indoors. And when you have 50, only allow 50 indoors, it's very hard obviously, to then allow fans to attend. All winter sport athletes will need to wear a face covering at all times when competing. This is different than what happened in the fall. In the fall, since we were outdoors, they were able to take it off when they were actually on the field. Now it needs to remain on at all times. The only exception is for swimming when obviously actually in the pool. So if it's their event for swimming, they'll take it off, put it in their bag, go swim, get out of the pool, come back, put it on, and that's the only time that can happen. If able, and the reason why I say if able, because obviously you never know when Wi-Fi and technology happens, but we're looking at home events will be live streamed on the EHS YouTube channel. Because we use the YMCA for swim, those may be on the DeFi Facebook page, and I'm still working with them on how that's going to work, but we'll certainly get that information shared with families once we know that for sure. Transportation will be provided by the ESD to and from away events. We're basically going to follow the same procedure we did in the winter, because remember, in the winter, we weren't allowed to send away fans to away events. So if a parent wants to take their child from the away event, they must just visually see the coach, and obviously when they get on the bus, take them. So if they want to sit in the parking lot, watch the game on their phone or wherever, and then take their students, they don't have to ride home on the bus, that's fine. They just need to, again, see the coach, and they'll be released to the student, or the parent. And then lastly, following the MPA and the DOE, the COVID county colors, as we refer to them as, are assigned on Fridays. We've been lucky that Hancock County has not been designated yellow or red, but as soon as if that was to happen, then we would certainly shut down all sports and co-curricular activities at that point until we return to green status. And that's something that just comes out every Friday at noon. So, I've kind of, in the fall, I warned coaches, be prepared, I may call you at 12:30 saying, we're done. Or we're done until we go back to green. So it's just something that we have to be aware of moving forward through the winter. So, yes.
Just a point of clarification, I think a lot of people mistake this. It's actually not the DOE who issues the color coding system for counties. It's actually named DHHS. People equate it with DOE because that color coding applies to schools, but it's not the Department of Education who puts it out. It's Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you. So now I'll kind of touch on each winter sport that we offer here at the high school, and then I'm sure Travis is on the line and he can talk about the middle school sports. So first of all, wrestling. The MPA has postponed the season to the end of February. So what we are recommending is that we kind of revisit this and indoor volleyball, girls volleyball, for a late February, March season as we get closer to those start dates. If allowed, in the MPA, kind of in late January, early February, is still looking to have a wrestling season during that time period, then we would certainly start wrestling practices at the beginning of February. But right now, we're kind of encouraging wrestlers to go maybe try swimming or try indoor track. If you want to stay in shape, join the indoor track team, because you'll find out what they're doing in a second. But maybe give basketball a try. Or cheering a try, any of those. So at this point, we're just encouraging them to try something else with the high hopes that we are able to offer wrestling in an alternative season.
Just a question, Josh. With the understanding the MPA has postponed the season until the end of February, at this point in time, they're not looking at changing the guidelines that they issued, are they?
I don't believe so. No.
So
But
wondering if it may be prudent that part of the recommendation tonight is, as you can tell, the way we're talking, the recommendation is going to be that we follow the guidelines. And that's what's going to come forth to the board. But if some of that could include approving the wrestling guidelines as presented and come back and revisit it if there's a change in those things.
absolutely.
Just a thought.
Yep.
Again, the board can take that up when you get to discussion.
Yep. For indoor track, the major issue with indoor track is the facility we use is the UMaine Fieldhouse. And as you know, right now, a lot of college campuses aren't allowing anybody onto their campuses. So, and we've reached out as a league to find out when might we possibly be able to get onto the campus to use the Fieldhouse. And we've basically been told it's not available right now. So we don't intend that that will probably be available at all. So what the PVC is doing is looking at hosting maybe some mini meets. Again, staying underneath that 50 number for any type of mini meet where we do a Thursday thrower shot put competition, because in indoor track, the only throwing event is shot put. So maybe we have 4 or 5 schools go to Bucksport High School, or we host an event and they show up there and we throw shot put. We put down some wrestling mats or cheering mats, and that's what we do. We actually have an indoor throwing, I don't know what you have to actually call it, where you stand and throw shot put. I guess you push it, you don't actually throw it. But we have one of those for indoors, so we'd be looking to use that just in hosting a mini meet. Same with throwers and jumpers, doing a Friday jumpers, high jump, long jump inside, and then using some of the bigger gyms to use kind of the sprinting and the longer runs indoors. Again, as a league, we're just looking for anything that we can provide these students that would be somewhat comparable. If we had weather like we did today, where at least the temperatures were warm enough, we could certainly host one outside. But that's not probably going to happen in January and February. Again, those are all in the planning stages right now. And the same thing, hosting those events, we have to follow all the MPA guidelines. But what we're looking at doing for indoor track is first of all winter sports are allowed to start next week with kind of a conditioning week. Drills and skills week is what they're calling it. In person, they did change that. It's now in person next week. And then on the week of the 14th, kind of ramping it up and doing more sport-specific things and your tryouts and so on and so forth. But for next week and the week of the 14th, we're looking at doing some outdoor running. Generally, they'll get outside in December and be able to run the trails until it's, we have a lot of snow on the ground. And they're usually doing that right after school until, 3:45 when it's too dark to kind of be outside. But we're looking at doing that 3 times a week next week and the week after, and then revisiting what practices will look like during the holiday break, because during the holiday break, the gym is available a lot more. And then the week of January 4th, doing more specialized practices, so more emphasis on throwing and sprinting and hurdles and so on and so forth. With the hope by January, we have an idea of, are we going to be able to host these mini meets or are we not? And so that would be one thing that, wrestlers, if they want to stay in shape, I would encourage them to maybe go with the indoor track team and do those things. So swimming and diving. So the YMCA is still allowing us to use the Down East YMCA, which we're very grateful for, as they're under the same guidelines as everybody else is. So the swim meets this year, they're looking at being virtual, which will mean it may be an Ellsworth versus MDI swim meet on a Friday night at 7 o'clock, but Ellsworth is at DeFi, MDI is at the MDI YMCA, and we're both swimming at the same exact time. We send our times in and compare the times, and so we may not know the winner of each event or even the meet itself until Saturday or Sunday, but that's the way they're looking at that.
I bet some parents appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I know some of the Y meets are especially long too. So
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Very innovative. Yeah.
Yep. So next week we're looking at doing kind of an open pool, working on some technique work, just getting kids back into the pool, because even the D5 swimmers that swim for the high school as well have not been, coached. They have been in the pool, but just not coached. And so looking at that, and then the week of the 14th doing more intense practices and kind of ramping it up a little more. Same thing, there's one of the things for the guidelines say is, again, spacing kids out, only allowing 3 swimmers allowed per lane, and following those guidelines there. Also, we have, in the last 2 years, MDI has very graciously allowed us to send our divers to them, and allowed them to practice with the MDI divers. We have no way of diving at Down East YMCA because we don't have a diving board, the pool's not deep enough. So those divers have been training with the MDI YMCA, and if approved by you and obviously approved by MDI, we'd like for them to continue to do that, to train with the MDI divers. The divers practice at a different time than the swimmers, and they're literally just doing that, walking up on the diving board, practicing the dive, and then listening to the coach with its fix. So that's that on swim. Cheering. Same as swimming, all competitions are virtual. And the reason why these competitions are virtual is because with cheering, again, you're talking about a large number of people in the gym for a competition. And it would just be very difficult for that to happen. So from my understanding, I'm still waiting for the MPA bulletins to come out and how this is all going to work. But the teams will have a certain time to perform, maybe a Saturday morning or a Friday night competition, and you have to upload your video to a site at a certain time, either Friday night or Saturday, and that's how you'll get scored. So you'll get judged by that. I've talked to my coaches. They actually like the idea of possibly using the video because, you can really, we wonder how judges are going to judge. They're going to watch the video and just judge it that way, or they're going to pause it, go back, look at slow motion. Did they actually do this? Did they actually do that? Are they being scored accurately? So they actually like the idea of that, and probably something like this may continue into the future.
So Josh, I have a question. So is there a certain time? So I'm just curious about dropping stunts and stuff like that and losing points. So do they just get to keep doing it until they get a perfect video?
That's what I was thinking.
Right,
Kind of gives you a chance to redo it.
It's somewhat an honor system. I'm still waiting to see how this is going to work.
Yeah.
We can't say the competition is on Saturday and send a video in from Tuesday. So I honestly don't know yet. I'm waiting to see how it's going to be because, if you've ever seen a cheerleader, and I have one at home,
Yes.
one time through the routine, and they're gassed, they're breathing very heavily. So
Right.
if they only have 15 minutes, and the first time you drop, and let's go again, you don't want to burn them out. So we'll see how that's going to look. Yeah. But the PVC is looking to host several competitions because if it is just a virtual competition like that, there's no need to travel. Why not, again, try to provide as many opportunities as possible? The vocal/cheer part of the routine has been taken out. However, I've talked to our coaches and talked to several other ADs that may still be in, but you're not going to actually see the mouths move and you're not going to hear them because it's going to be just recorded onto the music that they're doing. So they may still do the motions or the dance that goes along with that cheer, but it's not actually them speaking at that particular time. Does that make sense? So that's something that they can build into their music. And then no pyramid stunts. So that's just when you have everybody together and it looks just like a pyramid. You have kind of a group and they're kind of looks like a pyramid. So they're not all together, but they can still do stunts just on separate parts of the mat.
Single stunt groups.
Yeah, not all together. And they just don't want that kind of, the person from the very top of the stunt falling down and then just everything else happens and just that closeness. So same with other sports. Next week, starting conditioning practices, cheer-specific drills, and then more routine-specific practices will begin on the 14th. And again, no timeline as far as competitions go, but the MPA cheer committee recommends that sideline cheering for basketball games not happen for the 2021 season, again, because they can't actually cheer at games. And then basketball. So regionalized games with bordering counties is what they're looking at, 12 games. Teams are encouraged to come dressed and ready to play. Teams will not use the locker room at halftime. In the past, in the halftime, they go in and listen to the coach. Everybody will still be in the gym, which will be kind of very interesting because there's not going to be fans. So if the coach is talking, you can hear the other coach talking, and we'll see how that goes.
Background noise.
Yeah.
Like in the
Yeah, we'll be
games on
playing.
TV. Lots of music.
We'll play some music. Actually, speaking of music, I've talked to Mr. Calandro. He's looking into former recordings of the pep band, so we can pipe
there you
those
go.
in and use
There you
those
go.
as warm-up music as opposed to the other stuff that the kids listen to. So.
Well, and you may get yourself in trouble on YouTube for copyright
Right.
if you show that
Right.
part of it on there.
Right.
That's true.
Yep. So we're looking into that. But the jump ball will no longer happen. It will be a coin flip. That's just something new they threw in there. And lastly, the team bench will be spread out to allow for 6 feet spacing, just like we did during the soccer season. Every student, every player will have their own spot where they're sitting. And I'm looking at using the actual bleachers for that, just only because I pull the bleachers out, and then at least the kid that's in the back row isn't, looking over 3 heads to what's going on in the court. They can actually be up and and see what's going on and whatnot, so. Game times are probably gonna be spaced out a little bit more. In the past, we've played at 5:30 and 7. I'm looking at probably playing at 5 and 7. 2 reasons, obviously, you're looking at probably having to send 2 buses to an away match or an away game, but also that extra time in between will allow for sanitizing of the benches. And may also allow us just to throw the doors open, let kind of some fresh air come in, and then bring the other team in and start warming up. So just like the other sports, skills and drills will begin next week with some gym time. Next week, the students are grouped by grade level and gender. And then the week of 12-14 tryouts will begin with team practices will beginning on or about 12-17. And then lastly, unified basketball. As you know, we started unified basketball 4 or 5 years now ago. Again, the MPA is hoping to look forward to a January 11th start of that season. In the past, Ellsworth High School always started a week later, so that's typically when we start is around the 19th. But just like the MPA, they're waiting to hear from Special Olympics Maine to see what are they doing with their students, if they're going to allow competitive sports to happen. Again, we're looking to offer anything and everything we can for our unified athletes as well, even if it's just getting together once or twice a week to have some practices and some fun inter-squad games. And I believe the middle school is looking at that too. But again, we can revisit that in January, or if approved tonight, move forward with that idea once we have some more guidance from the MPA. So that's that for the high school.
Josh?
Yes.
Do you have projected participation counts for these sports? For the sports that will be happening?
Not exactly. If this is approved tonight, I'll be sending out a survey to students as soon as I got home to get an idea. Looking at last year's participation numbers, I can tell you that swimming will probably be around the 30 mark. Boys basketball, we've always offered 3 teams, and we look to do that again, so you're looking around 30 to 35. Girls basketball, we did offer 3 teams a couple of years ago. We've gone back down to 2, just a JV and a varsity. So you're looking between 25 and 30. Indoor track last year was rather large. They were around 30. In a typical season, that's not bad for indoor. Outdoors, are usually a lot more. Cheering, we lost a lot of seniors last year, but we're still looking for about 10 to 12 cheerleaders. What am I missing? Wrestling, last year we only had 6 or 7 wrestlers. We only lost 1 senior, so I expect about that same amount this year. I think that's about it. So I'll have a better idea once I send that survey out.
Yep.
And that's kind of in lieu of, in the past, it's been, sign up on the gym doors.
Yeah.
And we just can't do that this year.
And a question about swim. Typically, there's backup timers in each lane, so 2 backup timers who, in case the touchpad and doesn't work correctly. Are you still going to do that?
We need to provide 1 timer. Now, they've changed it. We need to provide 1 timer per lane because we'll only be using 3 lanes, most likely, to space out the lanes. We'll only need 3 timers plus 1, so 4 total, because that 1 is in case the other timers don't get going in time.
Right.
And what I'm looking at doing, the Student Council and NHS has kind of reached out, and they're looking for community service hours. A lot of students need those, so I'm looking at using student timers right now, and give those students obviously a chance to earn the community service hours that they're kind of not getting out in the public, and weren't able to get through all of this. So I'm looking at it that way.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep.
So this recommendation tonight, it's to go from now until the end of February? That is our season?
That, yes, possibly. Again, the bulletins, which are specific dates, have not been released yet. These are just the guidelines. I've heard rumors that basketball is going to be allowed to go to the middle of March, just because then they'll give them a 2-month season if we don't start till January 11th, and on March 11th, something around there. I think it just depends. Typically in the spring, we start around the 3rd or 4th week of March. The MPA and probably state agencies and other schools don't want to lose another spring season like we did last year, so they're not looking to overlap those. With the exception, obviously, volleyball and wrestling. So I think it just depends. It depends on what's going on. So, but I haven't seen any cutoff dates. Like we knew for the fall, like the cutoff date was like the second Saturday in November. We haven't seen that yet.
But you had the MPA bulletins by then. Different from the guidelines, the bulletins, Abby, I think we're going to answer your question. They give a specific start date, which they've given here, but they have the end dates for whatever the end of the season is. I don't think they've determined those yet. My thought would be you would, if the board is going to approve, you would approve the season based upon what their bulletin is going to say, even though you don't know what it is.
Even, they've put in the 12 games. That's the only thing they've,
Yeah, and where that number's coming from is they're doing 2/3 of everyone's normal season.
I see.
So normally we play 18 games, so that's why they're saying 12.
Are they anticipating any tournament of any kind for basketball?
Not cross center, not northern, southern state games.
Right.
But as a league, I'll tell you that there was a lot of schools, not a lot of schools, there was at least one pod that did a end of the season tournament for soccer. And it was great because it gave those kids an opportunity to still feel that championship
Yeah.
tournament feel. So for basketball, we are looking into that. So whether the 12 games we play may only be 10 regular season games,
Right,
with the
two
idea
kind of.
that allows us 2 games on the back end to maybe have a tournament. For basketball, we are looking at playing mostly the B schools and a couple of the A schools, especially with Bangor, Brewer, and Hamden kind of being those outliers that are kind of close by, but we don't typically play them. We are looking at including them. So doing something like that. Yep.
Josh, do you have an idea of how many seniors we have that typically play winter sports?
For every sport's a little different. For swim, we have about 6 or 7. Basketball, for the boys, we only had 1 junior last year. So if he was to come back out, or maybe more might come out this year. So those numbers will be low. For girls basketball, we have a lot. This was our year. We have a lot there. For wrestling, we have a couple. Indoor track, it's probably about a handful. So, yeah.
So, in the fall, we could only play teams in our county, correct?
In the fall, we could play adjacent counties, and that's what they're looking at doing again.
Okay.
And so that normally we'd play Foxcroft Academy. Unfortunately, we can't play them because they're 2 counties,
Gotcha.
up. But so adjacent county
Okay.
or neighboring, I don't know which.
yeah,
Which-
Jason, I think, is what we
yeah.
used in the fall.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
So one of my concerns about voting on this is that we have something here that's saying, okay, we want to postpone volleyball, indoor volleyball, and wrestling. I would be more comfortable with voting on this if we have a contingency that we are not voting to cancel these sports. That if there were to be a recommendation to actually cancel a sport, we would need to take another vote. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I think if the MPA cancels it, then we don't need to vote. They supersede. The guidelines would be from I would imagine from the state level, not.
If that happens, my understanding would be this, and I think you asked a good question, Abby, but the guidance that the MPA's put out, generally, it conforms with the general guidance for community sports activities updated by the state back in early November. The MPA, working with all those agencies, has put these guidelines in place, and they don't have the bulletins with the actual dates on it. My understanding, and Josh and Dan, you guys can correct me on this or support it, the intent is for the MPA, along with the work of those agencies, to find a way for a season to happen. And that's why they're looking to postpone that out there, because wrestling right now is still considered a high risk by the National Federation of High School Sports. I would agree with what Jen said, though. If those powers that be and all those agencies say we're not going to offer wrestling, I don't think we have a choice.
Well, I'm concerned because there was some talk about how they don't want to overlap sports. While I can understand that, I think it's more important to not cancel a sport entirely than to have an overlap. My concern would be that we would be over the hump of COVID, but they would say a different sport is more important and just cut one out entirely, and I'm
I
not
don't-
comfortable with that, obviously.
I don't see that happening. Again, what they're doing is delaying the start to give it the best chance to happen. Typically for wrestling, again, you're looking at about an 8-week, maybe 7-week regular season. So in March, you're looking at about a 4-week season. Again, that 2/3 of a normal season. So I think that's what they're looking at doing, is just not necessarily canceling it, but giving it its best option. Same with football. The discussion right now for football is to put it at the end of spring season, carry into late June, early July, hopefully get those students enough rest before going back at it in the fall with hopefully a normal season as well. So, again, what the MPA is doing and the state agency is doing, give it the best effort to try to have something.
But then couldn't it potentially overlap with softball and baseball?
With wrestling or?
Yeah,
football.
Football, yeah.
Football possibly could. You're looking at when playoffs start,
Yeah.
is about when they may do that.
Okay.
So there may be some of that. That already happens in the fall when you have teams make the state championship. They usually overlap for like a week with winter sports
Yeah.
starting. So, yeah, they're used to that.
And I do have one more question for you as
Sure.
far as how you feel about the impact of face coverings on those people. I mean, I teach Zumba at the Y. We're teaching in face coverings, and I know that we get halfway through our hour and we kind of pause to check on everybody and make sure everyone is okay. But how do you feel? Do you feel like that's going to impact kids playing in a game, or do you feel like you're going to have plenty of time to rotate people off the court so they can catch their breath,
Yeah.
so to speak?
I mean, I go back to when I played in the late 90s. If you provide me a chance to play, I'm going
Yeah.
to play. I don't care.
Yeah.
And I think you're finding that with students too, like there's a lot of disappointed kids that weren't able to be at school today. And I just think, any opportunity to play, they're going to want to play.
Yeah.
So,
The other thing to add with that is, if you remember, back in the fall, masks actually were a big point of discussion at the state agencies. Maine opted not to go with them when it was vigorous physical activity. One of the things they've looked at since the fall is some of our neighboring states actually did mandate masks and found that the experience was not a negative one. So I think that's one of the reasons you see the agencies in Augusta have moved in that direction here.
well, I think you go
I
back.
would agree with Josh. I'm not gonna say the 90s Josh, because I played a little bit earlier. Give me a mask, if that's the only way that I can
Yeah.
play.
Now, do we provide masks for?
We would?
Okay.
Yep.
So I know we have an athletic trainer, correct?
Yep.
He'll be at all of the games, but what about practices?
Yep, he's there all the
Okay,
time.
great.
That was worked in as part of the contract
Good.
with that organization.
Yep, and that's been huge last
worth-
year and
worth
this
its weight
year.
in gold.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Do we allow students to overlap sports? So say if somebody wanted to do track and typically wrestled and then their season started, would that maybe allow them to continue?
Yeah.
Or would they,
Certainly.
And, okay,
In the past, we've allowed students to dual sport too.
okay.
We put
You know.
that in 4 or 5 years
Yep.
ago to allow students to participate in 2 sports in a season. We may need to look at those guidelines, but it would seem as though if the same standards would apply, the student could manage it, it's okay with their parents, they keep their grades up, why not?
Okay.
And I
Just
think in
thinking
this,
if volleyball and
Right.
wrestling come up and they're
Yep.
already committed, they might be able
Yep.
to take advantage.
I
Well-
do think with that season piece, though, they've used the phrase shoulder season. What they would try to do before they would cancel anything is maybe shorten the spring season, maybe 2/3, as Josh is saying with the schedules here for the spring sports, so that those volleyball season, the wrestling season could take place, and not put kids in a position, kids who can't do 2 sports at one time,
Okay.
not put them in a position where they have to choose. And I do think that's what the powers that be are really trying to do.
well, and if they're going by that 2/3 number, usually we play 16 baseball, softball games. So now you're looking at, 11?
Yeah.
So that means we don't have to start April vacation. We could start actually a little bit later, which would probably be better, to play
field.
baseball.
Living in the
Yeah,
dry.
exactly.
They're always soaked.
Yeah.
Now, I think I recall seeing in the full report, something about cohorts. will there be cohorts for these
And
sports?
so
Is
the-
that what are you
the-
guys thinking as
The
far
way
as-
they do cohorts is by team.
Okay,
So,
so it's not like maroon or gray?
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
yep, yep.
All right. You want to hear from
I think Travis would be happy to
Travis
speak.
is on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you,
Josh.
Josh.
Yep.
Travis, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
All right. So I just want to echo pretty much everything that Josh said. I do, however, have some differences. Some of those differences are pretty straightforward. Basketball being in particular, of course, we do the same dates. The 7th to the 13th would be skills and drills, with the 14th to the 10th being tryouts and practices. But because of the number of people we've had historically try out for basketball, I would actually have to break my teams up by cohort and by half a grade, just based on the numbers, historic numbers. So, for instance, a grade practice, the first practice would be half of the 6th, half of the 7th, and half of the 8th grade. And then on the next grade cohort day, we'd swap that, so the other half would have the first practice of each of those grades, until we get the numbers down to where we could actually put them in by teams, and that's when my cohort would be the girls A team, the girls B team, and the boys A team and the boys B team for basketball, for instance. Then we have cheering would be the same, as Josh said. We'd go the 7th to the 13th for skills and drills. Again, they can stunt except for the pyramid stunts, so they could start working on the week of the tryouts, which is the 14th to the 10th. They could do the more rigorous practices. But again, not so much last year, but the year before that, we had pretty big numbers. So to be safe, my plan has, again, the half of the 6th, half of the 7th, and half of the 8th grade on maroon and gray days being separate. Now, if that shows that our numbers are low enough to keep us under 50 and following the guidance and safety, working with the coaches, then we may be able to actually go to a cohort after the tryout of A team and a B team. Wrestling will follow the same, as well as unified. We'll have to wait until the guidance comes out from both the Special Olympics and from the MPA to determine when our season could start for both of those. And then just as a side note as well, our league has not met yet. As of now, we have a spreadsheet that says we have we have 4 people in our league that have said yes. And we have 1, 2, 3 that are unknown or probable. So until other school boards meet and vote, we won't meet until we know who can actually play, and we'll start putting our schedule together accordingly. And we have one, it's Bucksport Middle School, who left our league last year, but definitely wants to play within our league this year because they're so close.
Who else is in your league, Travis?
We have Bangor. We have 2 schools in Bangor, Cohen and Doughty.
Mm-hmm.
We have Brewer. And then Reedsbrook Middle School, which is Hamden.
Mm-hmm.
Herman Middle School. And then Nokomis, which is down in Newport.
Okay.
And in the fall, we didn't play Nokomis based on the distance.
So in breaking those teams into cohorts for basketball with the half grades, how many teams are you anticipating?
Oh, at the middle school, we'll only ever have 2 teams total.
Okay.
But for the start of this, I can't even. I don't remember the exact number, but I'm going to say it was like 22 students we cut the first year.
Wow.
In boys
There's a lot
basketball.
that go out for basketball.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was crazy. In the second year, I think it was like 15 to 18.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and the girls, that changed a little bit last year, we're actually able to keep all the girls. So we may be able to make some changes based on the numbers, but Erica and I have talked. I've obviously been talking a lot with Josh. We're talking about doing the same thing upon board approval, putting out feelers to find out what our numbers would look like so that we can maybe actually have a better plan than just, I put the half grades in the maroon cohorts based on historic numbers, but if I knew the numbers were smaller than that, then we could actually get more kids. We may have to go by grade level, but at least it would be an entire grade level instead of half. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So how many, if you cut 22 and 18 in previous years, what are the sizes of the teams, generally speaking?
Most B teams at the middle school level run between 13 and 15 kids.
Okay.
And then the A teams are going to be more like a high school team. You may carry 10,
Okay.
11 if there's two kids that are really, really close.
Sounds
I
like
think
a-
last year Mike had 13, to be honest with you. I just did the numbers in my head. I think we had 13. And one of those was a manager, so we had 12 players.
Okay.
Excellent.
Super.
Well, I thank you for putting all that effort into
Yeah.
making these plans, all of our coaches. It's it's like a gigantic jigsaw puzzle with moving pieces all the time.
Yeah.
It's good to
It
know.
sure is.
Yeah.
I do.
Say about Unified, I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in, Travis.
No,
I just
go
want to note, historically, at the middle level, for Unified basketball, we've had enough students where we could play together. So once we get those guidelines and
Yes.
figure out what the Special Olympics are going to do, similar to high school, we may, if we're not allowed to play other middle school teams, we may be able to do something for those students just within our school. So I just want to point that out too, that that
That's awesome.
we have that we're looking at as well.
Thank you. That's excellent.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks,
thank you
Erica.
for that. I forgot. I do want to mention that for our basketball, we won't be using the bleachers for teams. We have enough individual chairs to lay them out. I've measured the gym, the big gym where we play, and I can put 3 rows of chairs that allows us to be 6 feet apart, both forward and backwards and side to side. It also leaves room for the scorekeeper's table and the timer's table, which is the same table. But laying it out, it took me a little bit, but I think once we make the marks and everybody knows what chair they need to be in. So my plan would be to have the live streaming equipment, which has been okay through COVID money for us. Jen Berry set us up a YouTube channel, much like the high schools. But again, we won't need to have the 1,000 because we'll be using and Josh can say it better than I can because I don't remember the word, but some box. We don't have to use that. And so we have the ability, should have the ability to live stream every home game, and I'll be paying somebody to do that for the season.
That's
But
great.
other than that, I think Josh and I work together on these documents to make sure that they merit each other because we'll follow the same guidance that's set forth for all winter sports.
I do have a public question that would be for one of the two of these athletic directors, and that would be the athletic trainer that they have at the high school. This is from Jane Stackpole. Would the athletic trainer be shared with the middle school?
He's on call.
Okay.
He doesn't go to the events. He's not there kind of patrolling like he is for the high school practices and games, but his phone's always on, and, if there was a serious injury or something that had taken place, he can certainly scoot over and be there. That's something that we worked into the contract with Northern Light Hospital.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jane, for your question, and thank you, Josh, for the answer.
Do we have any other questions, Elizabeth?
Not right now.
Okay.
So Travis, I just had one other thing. I just kind of want to make sure that we ask you and that you give us your very candid answer, are you fairly certain that all of the coaches involved in these sports are okay with these guidelines? That they're feeling confident that this can continue and they can be safe?
Yes, I wholeheartedly believe that the coaches are of the same opinion of Josh and I and practically the entire district, which is give them a way to play. Let them get this out. Let them get in. I sent some guidance along last week, the beginning of this week. I don't even know what today is. I apologize, but I sent all my coaches
Tuesday.
what the guidelines would be, which include electronic whistles inside, which I purchased early fall. I purchased them because Josh and I were talking and we couldn't find any anywhere. And I found some through Turner and bought a few to make sure that we have enough so that we won't be blowing, making any chance at all that they're moving their mask to blow a whistle or anything like that. They understand they have to be on, and it's for the entire practice. They're allowed to move the mask for water. We're going to make sure that they understand that as soon as the mask is wet with sweat, because, of course, we're inside and we're working, they should change to a new mask and that kind of stuff. So Josh and I have been reaching out to our coaches. I personally believe that our coaches are going to do everything they can, just like our fall coaches did, to make sure that we have a safe and successful season for the kids.
Now, what about ventilation? Are there going to be doors open, fans on?
We have to be
Kinda thing?
careful with the doors open because then you're looking at a security.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And
And we live in
thing.
Maine and it could be 10 below zero.
Yeah,
One of the things that we've done, and we've had this in place since the school year started, is our ventilation systems, usually they're on a night setback and not running all the time. They're running 24/7.
Yeah. And they have those in the gyms as
Yeah.
well, and, perfect.
Yes. And I think when you have the limitation of not being able to have spectators in there,
Yeah.
that provides even that much more space, that much more room for that system to work
Won't
more
get so-
effectively.
Right, there's
Sticky and-
there's not nearly as much hot air in the air.
That's right, that's right.
And our gyms have been notoriously warm
Yeah.
Very true.
historically.
Any other questions? Any discussion?
The Volleyball's pondering,
Well,
just a
thank
couple.
you.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you, Travis.
And Erica.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the things, and again, just so the board has it, so the members of the public have it, the guidelines that are put in place, or the efforts of a lot of organizations that work together, put in place the best opportunities for safety for our students and our coaches and our school communities. The MPA Sports Medicine Advisory Committee believes that strict adherence by schools and teams to these guidelines and to each school's safety plans, which we do. Josh and Travis and the staff members did a great job of that in the fall. Well, frankly, let's just say it, our staff members are doing a great job with health and safety anyway.
Period.
But that's a piece that's important. The other piece, and Beth, I said it to you, the face covering piece was a big issue in the fall. The research that the agencies have done, what happened in other states, said that they worked really well. I think that's why you see them here. The other piece, and we mentioned this in the fall, adoption of the school sports guidance, like other state developed or recognized guidance, is voluntary and a precondition for any school sports to take place. If a school district cannot feasibly implement and enforce the guidance, it should not allow sports in its schools. That's something that comes directly from that return piece. And I think what you're hearing from our athletic administrators tonight, which is also the product of work with their building principals, they know that there's going to be strict adherence to that. Our administrators are on board with it, our coaches are on board with it, and our students are going to be. You've seen our students, you guys all have students in the schools. I don't know if they come home and complain about wearing masks, but they do it the way they're supposed to. And as we said earlier, kids that want to participate and kids that want to play are going to do what they need to do.
Well, I think too, like, just to add on top of that, when we started in the fall, and they had to wear face coverings when they came to the field and, stretching and things of that nature, they had already been in school for 2 weeks and were used to wearing them in school. Whereas there was another school district, I won't name what school district, but they were not in school yet and had their first fall practice, and kids were all over each other and not wearing face coverings properly
Right.
and things of that
Makes it
nature. So,
harder.
our students are used to wearing them.
My children I pick them up at school and they forget to take them off. Once
Yes.
they get in the car,
Yes.
Very too.
as we're pulling out of the parking lot, I'm like, hey, you can take your mask off now.
Yeah.
Mr. Higgins, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I'm curious, what is the feedback that you have received from our school nurses and the consulting school physician regarding winter sports?
Winter sports, I have not spoken directly with them. I know our school nurses have been supportive of us following the guidelines. Certainly, they're looking at it from the health and safety piece. But as we've done since this entire thing started last March, all the recommendations that we bring to the board, all the decisions that we make are following the science and the guidance.
Thank you.
And tonight is no exception. Everything that's here is based upon science, guidance, the work of all these agencies. And that's what we're recommending.
Now, as far as, like sanitizing a basketball, like I know in soccer, you're touching it with your feet more than you are with your hands.
Yep, but we still sanitize.
Basketball, you're using your hands all the time, wipe your face, so how are you guys thinking that
And
you're
the,
gonna
and
be
the
able to-
guidance, if you look, it has to be, the ball should be sanitized after every quarter.
Okay,
And then every timeout. So what I'm actually looking at doing is having 4 game balls.
okay.
And then, you take quarter one, number one, and use that one in that quarter. And then, work through the balls that way.
Right.
So,
And then have plenty of sanitizer on
Yep.
the sidelines,
Yep.
just like we would anyway.
which is what we did during soccer season. We had to disinfect every 20 minutes.
So I have a question about you can't use the locker rooms. So what do they do if they need to use their restroom?
The locker room, right, so the locker rooms will be available. We have them posted right now. I believe they only allow 4 or 5 students at a time
I see, they
anyways
just
in the
can't
locker room.
congregate.
So they can't go in pregame, change up, listen to the music, get hyped up, all that sort of stuff. It's gonna be just bathroom access only.
Okay, great.
And obviously, we'll have 1 locker room for the home team and 1 locker room for the away team, so they won't be shared.
Yep. Great.
And at the middle school, we won't be using the locker room because we won't have the ability to clean and disinfect in between games. So we'll utilize the bathrooms across the hall from the big gym, middle school gym. And we're asking, in our guidance, we're asking our coaches to have our kids arrive at the other school ready to play. And we would expect that people coming to our school would come ready to play.
Okay,
Excuse me.
great. Any further discussion? I know, I talked about this in the fall, and we talk a lot about our kids' mental and social and emotional health and how important that is, especially right now. And I have to say, going into the winter, even more so, because just not being able to get outside and enjoy an alternative, if you weren't allowed to allow something like this. So a lot of that comes into consideration for me, because I want to see these kids, especially seniors. Kelly mentioned that, it's an important time for these kids, and a lot of the times it keeps them engaged and keeps them, keeps their academics up as well. So I certainly would be in favor, so.
I can echo that, Jen. To be honest, I put a lot of thought into this, and it's
absolutely.
a hard decision. I even reached out to a friend of mine who's an epidemiologist for the state, and just back and forth with her, what do you think? And it really, I think we know that the virus doesn't affect kids like it does, for the most part, like it does adults. However, my concern is the spread of the virus to other adults, to teachers. That's really what's kind of holding me back a little bit. That being said, I think the mental, emotional, social health of these kids kind of trumps it for me a little
Absolutely.
bit.
Yep, I understand.
Especially with their lives being so changed and disrupted
You
for so
are right.
long.
Could I echo that? Because what Kelly said, I don't disagree with that at all, Kelly. There are concerns out there, and I think much of the conversation's been taking place at the state level, including the organizations that contributed to those conversations. You know, I know that the Maine School Boards Association voiced concerns along those same lines, as did the Superintendents Association. And that's why I refer back to, throughout this process, the recommendations we've come forward with, or decisions that we've made have been based upon the recommendations that are based upon the science that comes from these people. It doesn't mean there's not concerns there, I agree with you completely. But that's how our administrators came to the point of saying we want to recommend this, because it's based upon the guidance, we've been doing that consistently.
And I think the
But like
interesting.
anything else, it doesn't come without some level of
Yeah.
concern,
Right,
absolutely.
Right.
Right.
And I think the interesting thing is we have been designated green all
Right.
this time, and if that changes to yellow,
Exactly.
it ends. You
Yep.
know, and
Yeah.
that's not a decision by us, it ends. You know, it's,
Yes.
those, curricular activities are done.
Yep.
So I think it's a good testament to make sure everybody stays safe and does what they're supposed to do, you know, and so that,
Well, and it may end too if Hancock County's green, but Penobscot County is yellow. So if
Yeah.
we're to play several teams from Penobscot County,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know,
And
Would
everyone we
we-
play turns yellow.
would we then have the
Yes.
opportunity, though, to play, gosh, for middle school, that really doesn't leave you with many, does it?
My understanding in reading this is, it's our county and adjacent counties. And right now, I'm thinking, is Washington County still yellow, or are they back to green?
I think
They
they're
are
yellow
yellow.
still.
Yep.
So Washington County is off.
Yep.
Well, this
But I feel like we can cross that bridge when we come
Yeah,
to it,
that's
you
5
know?
weeks, that's
I-
5 weeks away before we
Right.
start playing
Well,
games and
and the
things.
track team.
Next to the middle school for just a minute.
Sure,
In
yes.
regards to that,
Sorry,
if
Abby.
that were to happen, I think we can provide opportunities with some schools in Hancock County still, but also within our own selves. I think we have enough kids to do that and still provide opportunities for kids to play.
Right.
I think that's a noble effort, but we want to rely on the guidance. I believe the guidance says if you go yellow, in-person co- and extracurricular activities are suspended.
Oh, no, I think
Right.
she means if Penobscot
If-
County
right.
went yellow and we were still green.
if
Like if we were,
Another
yeah,
county.
yeah, because that, we had to not go, the cross-country middle school, we had something set, and then we couldn't compete against them.
Yep.
And so they did something just at home, and it was wonderful. The
Yeah.
kids got to run,
Right.
they got to exercise
If
in,
Hancock
it was
County is the
wonderful.
only green county we can play, and honestly,
Right.
I'll go back to being a student athlete. If
You
that
can
means
play,
we have to
play.
play Bucksport 4 times and MBI
Right.
4 times,
Yeah.
so be it.
I also still
Right.
love
Or we
to play
play
MBI
ourselves.
4 times.
You know?
It'll be fine.
But if
Right.
if all of Hancock County were doing it.
Right.
And
Right.
I think our students would feel the same way.
Right.
In fact, a rivalry with MDI, why not?
There you go.
Twice as
Right.
many.
It's just important that the parents understand that, you know, how much, we only have control of this, right
Yep.
here.
Yep.
We don't have control of Washington County, we don't have control of, if Bucksport just says, we're not comfortable with this, we
Right.
have no control.
Right.
That's
Right.
them, we are voting on just what our school district is doing here. And I think you're very right, I mean, I'm very concerned with, like, Mary bringing something home and something happening, but, you know, this is an extracurricular activity. This is a choice. It's not mandatory. You know, if I understand parents and families not being comfortable, and they have, you know, very valid reasons for that. I think it's up to each family to decide. And we have to at least keep that door open if we can, to let them decide and let them be the parent. And, you know, we do have to make sure that their mental health, because it's getting dark out there.
It is.
It
It is. I'm
Abby,
concerned.
If I can follow up on that, I don't disagree with you, but I think another thing that's important for our public to hear, you know, just as we do in the schools, you know, there are those 6 health and safety requirements that we're adhering to. And that's the reason that when you've had a positive case, we haven't seen community spread in
Yeah.
our schools. Our
Right.
people are vigilant about it.
Right.
What you're being asked to vote on tonight is a return to athletics that follows the guidelines for health and safety that are put in place by all these agencies. So I agree that it's a choice, but even if it's a choice, we're still going to be following
Yep.
health and safety guidelines.
Right, right. It's a choice if the parent sends a child or not. That's the
Yes,
only
yep.
choice I'm talking about.
Yep.
But yeah, if you send your child, they have to adhere to
Yep, right.
these guidelines. We don't have any leeway here. This is it.
Josh, I have a question. So in the fall, when kids were competing, they didn't have to wear masks, correct?
Correct.
So I am a little concerned about kids, because we know how kids get in that gym playing basketball. I mean, they are giving it 110% and exerting themselves.
So in
Like the physical, that concerns me. And I know, I'm sure that we're going to, be educating coaches and.
So in the fall, we also did not have the governor's mask mandate,
Yeah,
I
right.
guess. And that happened at the very end of the season, where we actually went to Bucksport with our JV girls soccer team, got off the bus, and were told, if we're playing in the game today, you need to wear a mask the
Yeah.
entire time. And the girls talked it over with the coach and discussed it. They had not been conditioning all season wearing a mask when they got up to those vigorous exercise and conditioning drills.
Yeah.
So they decided to get back on the bus and come home.
Yeah.
So I feel like, again, we're easing our way into this.
Yeah.
And the coaches will know that. So hopefully by conditioning, we're going to be conditioning for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Typically,
Yeah.
a preseason is 2.5, so that hopefully that will help
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And I also
Yeah, I think
recall, in addition to the 4 weeks, one of our student athletes was quoted in a recent newspaper article when these guidelines first came out, asking about wearing a mask. He said, just like Josh and I said, it's a way for me to have an opportunity to play, so I'm going to start, I work out all the time anyway, I'm going to start working out, wearing a mask and getting used to it.
Well, and that's what you have to do now at the Y
Right.
as well. You can't, it's not like it's the only time that you would have to wear a mask during exercise. It's anywhere now.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I feel it gives them a good chance to ease into it and for 4 weeks, see if, maybe there'll unfortunately be students that just won't be able to do it, but, I think for the most part, they're gonna push
Yeah.
through as much as they can just so that they can play.
I kind of feel like if they can practice football in Florida in 110-degree heat, we can learn to wear masks and do
Can
this.
figure it out.
Right. I mean, because people do, athletes have to face extremes all the time in different ways. This is another one.
Absolutely.
Not a fun one, but it's the one we have.
So before we move forward with the motion, should we make sure that whatever motion includes that should the guidelines come out for wrestling, that we move forward with wrestling as well? Is that part of that?
Or would this encompass that as well with
Yeah,
the school
I'm
sports
just reading the
guidance?
I was
recommended one.
reading it too.
I think that would encompass it. I know
Okay.
one of our fellow districts here in Hancock County, they included, as part of a plan, to follow all health and safety guidelines with regard to athletics. So they're not taking a separate vote on winter
Right.
sports. So what they're doing is, whatever the guidelines are that are in place, that's what they're going to follow. I think you could also make it an analogy to, there's nothing in here that says, in this motion that says, if you go yellow, you're going to suspend everything, but we're going to do it. What it does say in here is, with regard to wrestling, we're going to look to have a season at the end of February.
Yeah.
Whenever that season is deemed to start,
That's what
I'm
I
reading
would
this motion
follow.
to say
Yeah,
that if
it's
this is
still,
what you
it's still
vote to
technically a
approve,
winter sport.
it's a winter sport.
Yeah. It may be played in the spring, but it's still a winter sport.
Yes. That's how I'm interpreting it, and that's how we tried to write it.
And I just wanted to make sure that that was the case so that it wasn't excluded from.
Are there any other comments about this?
Nope.
Nothing?
No, these
Oh.
guys have done a great job answering these questions that have,
Yeah,
Well, I think your motion would want to include indoor volleyball as well. Girls volleyball, if they put that season to March, which is
Yeah.
what we're hearing,
Yeah.
Okay.
would be, it's not traditionally played in the winter, it's usually played in the fall. But that would be the only other thing that would possibly happen before moving forward with spring sports at a March school board meeting probably.
okay.
Well, and like I think in our motion, it's as presented, and we have the winter sport recommendations, which include,
I was just going to say, this references the return to school, return to sports guidance and the Maine Principals Association guidelines. And if you look in the packet that I sent to you, there is a volleyball one.
yeah,
as
Yes.
there is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're approving is that, those documents, that does include volleyball, even though
I
it's still a
agree.
fall sport.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
Yep.
Alright. You ready, Jen?
I'm ready for a motion.
All right. I make a motion to approve participation in winter athletics for 2020-21, consistent with the school sports guidance, return to competitive athletics and activities in Maine, and the Maine Principals Association guidelines for return to participation as presented by the superintendent, Ellsworth High School, and Ellsworth Elementary Middle School building administrators.
I second that motion.
All those in favor? Unanimous, 5-0.
So Josh and Travis, that means that you guys are gonna go and send your surveys and your assignments.
I'll be home in 10 minutes.
Students
I'd like
expect
to
them
eat dinner
coming.
first.
Josh, Travis, Dan, Erica, thank you for all
Yes,
your
thank
work
you
on
very
this.
much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Much appreciated.
Thank you,
And just
guys.
some housekeeping, if there are people watching tonight. So there will be a survey going out for signups at the high school level anyways. And then I'm looking at meeting with my coaches tomorrow night, and then there will be a parent player meeting on Thursday, the same we did in the fall, via Zoom, so webinar. And I will email that link out to all students, so the students should access that through their email. So look for that on Thursday night at 6.
And I'm sure as much as we appreciate all the work that you guys put into putting this together, the players and the parents appreciate it even more.
They're
So-
excited right now.
Yes.
Travis, did you need to put anything out to the public for,
I'll be doing the same thing as
Okay.
Josh. I'm going to send a link to a form for the students to fill out on what sports they're looking to do. And I have the same dates, and I think I just changed my hours for my coaches meeting, but they're already aware of that. And the parents would be the following night. I will send all that stuff out. Probably it'd be actually it will be on our website and our Facebook page.
awesome.
Excellent.
Link to that.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you.
Stress.
All right. So on to item F number 2, which is discussion on locations for meetings. I know this had come up, Kelly had presented this, and I had actually 2 or 3 months ago as well, I can't remember when. And this was a discussion, simply for the fact of allowing public to physically attend meetings. Abby had also brought up possibly aligning our times to our meetings being consistent with workshop versus, and board meetings. So having 6 o'clock start for both or a 6:30 start for both. So I know that didn't get lumped in with the location, but that was a recommendation that came up when we spoke about it before, for the agenda item, so.
Yeah, it'd be so
Discussion.
So my thought is, school board meetings are meant to be public meetings. And I understand in COVID times, nothing is what it
The same.
should be or whatnot. However, I feel that as long as we are adhering to CDC guidelines, and if people want to be at our meetings, we should make the attempt to make that happen. Not everyone in Ellsworth has the internet, so not everyone is able to watch our meetings, is able to send in questions. So that's my thought. These are meant to be public meetings, and I think they should be available to the public. I think it's really important.
One of the pieces that I would comment on is, first and foremost, your meetings held here. Pre-COVID, certainly anybody could attend, and there were times that people did. In fact, there were some nights, I think we talked about dress code. We had,
Useful.
Abby, do you remember how many people were here that night?
It was packed, it was
It
standing
was
room only.
packed. So in pre-COVID times, you had that. The other thing that we did with some workshops, we opted because we knew it would be an important topic. We would hold it at the middle school, and you would fill that cafeteria. So that's something the board has always done. With regard to access to meetings, I agree, not everyone has Facebook, not everyone has the internet. But one of the things that you get when you're here is you have the ability not just to stream it on Facebook, it's on public access TV. And I didn't realize until I came back to work here just how many people get their board meetings and their city council meetings and their workshops via public access. You lose that in most places that you go. The other thing that I think is important, I think we all value public input, but school board meetings are not like town meetings. They are not public meetings. School board meetings are by definition a meeting of an elected body held in public. They're not intended to be public meetings. And when you look at some of your smaller towns, your regional school units, when they do their budgets, and Jen, I think you and I had this conversation back in the summer when some of those districts are looking to have their school budgets approved. You know, our school budget is approved at 3 levels here. You as a board approve it, it goes to the city council, they approve it, then it goes to the voters. Voters do it in referendum here. In some of your other school district governance organizations, those are district budget meetings, which are public meetings because the public has to vote. Okay, the public doesn't vote at these meetings, but that's a distinction that not a lot of people understand. And it's not intended to make this clarification to say the public shouldn't have the opportunity for input, but they are not public meetings. They are meetings of an elected body in public. The other thing I would say is, since we have been having meetings that have had not just TV, but streaming, we've had more public participation than we've ever had, which I think is a healthy thing. And if you think back to what Steve Bailey said at your workshop, I'm gonna be like Travis, I don't even know what today is.
Last Tuesday.
Was it last Tuesday?
It's Tuesday after Tuesday after
There's
Tuesday.
legislation that is looking to permit that to continue to occur even after the governor's executive order or declaration of a state of emergency
Civil
expires.
emergency.
And I think whoever the legislative liaison is, and I know the Superintendents Association will, we want to support that because that's a healthy way to do it. It really is. So I think those are things that people need to understand. You know, this is the place for your meetings. You've got the television piece.
I don't
That's the
think-
legal side of it.
I don't think it would be to replace that. I mean, I know that it's said on a regular basis, like in regards to people submitting public questions, is that if we weren't in COVID times, people could walk up to the microphone and
Yep.
speak. So it would be, you know, at least during COVID, allowing people to still engage in this way, but also those people who do want to be seen as well as heard, it would give them that opportunity as well.
You lose your public access TV, though.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Mike, so go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So my concern is that people have been turned away. And the fact is, every one of these chairs in here is allowed to be filled. And I don't know if the public knows that we do have room here for them to come in to these meetings, and they can come to the podium. They can, they just have to be told that they can.
So that was what I was wondering. So there's nights when obviously we have this more full than tonight. So we
Right.
have administrators,
Yeah.
but we do,
On your regular meetings, you have all of your principals here, you have your directors here to do reports, and that takes your 6-foot spacing.
Yeah.
On a night like
It doesn't-
tonight,
It still doesn't fill it.
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that nothing has happened on that is, how do you determine who comes in?
It's
I mean,
first
that's
come,
cer-
first
that's
served.
cer-
First come,
That's
yeah.
that is certainly a way to do it. If we had somebody who could man the doors,
Mm-hmm.
then that would allow you to still have the TV access and do what Beth is saying, where somebody could come masked to the podium and speak.
I asked about this, if the chairs were full, they could stand 6 feet apart in the hallway with a mask on. And once our administrative reports are done, if those people leave, you know, if somebody leaves, then a chair can be
So,
filled.
question, how is the council doing this? Is that how the council is
Yeah.
doing it right now? So people can
Yeah.
wait?
Yeah, but nobody's lining up to, right? Like there hasn't been,
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
The
That's-
option's
But
there.
hypothetically, if they were lining
But
up
you know-
to,
but
they
you know-
would line up.
The
I mean,
options
and
there.
maybe that's the direction to go, because, you know, one of the other pieces is, and I don't say this in a negative way, sometimes it's easier to get your public comment or question done electronically because you don't have to be here physically. Some people are not going to come here. And you're right, there may be times that people won't come. In fact, aside from an issue like the dress code, or I'm trying to think of another one where we had, or, you know, when Mr. Clifford brings in, you know, the show choir for a performance, we've got this room packed, which I think is great. These meetings are typically not well-attended. One of the reasons is because it's so accessible via TV.
Yeah.
I would not have a problem talking with Chief Mosier to find out what protocols they use for council meetings and implement the same things here. Because you usually have, Mr. Clifford, Mrs. Clifford, Ms. Gabinelli, Ms.
Amy.
Coleman
Typically,
Ramos,
there's
Annie
5, I
Sargent,
think.
Amy Bowles.
Amy Bowles.
Sometimes.
Sometimes Carol Ann comes, but she usually comes to the meetings. So you're talking 7 or 8, so you'd still have, how many chairs do we have here?
There's 10, 11.
Right.
So, and I
And
honestly
they could
believe it's
filter
just.
in and out.
Yeah, it's only gonna be a few, is my guess.
That seems like an easy-
Historically,
Exactly what I
That seems like an
Um,
easy solution.
but I would support that. But if there's somebody that really wants to be here, I think they should have that chance to be here.
If that meets with the guidelines that the council is, and I thought we'd try to be consistent with what the council was doing, if that's what the council's doing.
From my understanding, that's why they set up the chairs ahead of time and where they're at. Is that,
They're socially distant.
right, that is.
Yep. Well, the
that-
chairs
that-
are-
and that, except for those 2 chairs right there, we could actually even fit somebody here, but the room is set up, besides those 2 chairs, the room is set up to a maximum capacity for COVID.
Well, why don't I do
When I
this?
asked, that's what I was
In my free time tomorrow, I'll give Chief Moser, City Manager Moser. I'm still trying to go back and forth between those two things. But I think that would address the desire to have people have the opportunity to be here, but
Yeah.
also allow you to maintain what your meetings actually are. And once COVID is gone, and let's face it, folks, there's positive news out there with regard to vaccines, once it's gone, there are still opportunities to go and hold a public forum, which, you can make a workshop a public forum, which is a public meeting. As opposed to like tonight isn't a.
That's what I was
quote-unquote.
gonna recommend, is if there was an item that we felt would, the dress code or something like that, that was gonna be
Well attended.
well
Yeah, we-
attended
Yes.
and the need was there, we could revisit that.
Yeah, well,
And
we-
hold it in the
We-
gym or
We've
something.
done that since 2014. We've had probably, you might have even done it in your first term, Kelly. We had a couple or 3 events like that up at EEMS. One was on school safety, where we packed the place.
Yeah, I remember that.
There was one on facility usage. That was I know you were on the board because you were on the board before I got hired.
Yep.
I don't know if you were on the board when that one
I wasn't,
happened, Kelly,
no.
but we had a real long and fruitful discussion.
Yeah.
It was a board workshop, but we had it there because it was, I mean, I think that's something the board's willing to do, but, you're right.
Yep.
COVID has squelched that piece, obviously, but, no, I'm happy to do that, and
I think the important
what-
piece too is we could also discuss that for workshop. If our workshops are being held here, so no different than when we were in the superintendent's office,
Yeah.
that is open
Right.
to the public.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we know why these tables need to be so far back? Is it because of the cameras? Like,
I
why
think
can't
so,
we be
yeah. I
think it
closer
is.
and
Yeah, I
make
think
it might-
more
it might be the
space?
cameras.
Yeah, I think it's
'Cause
probably.
I wanna say, like, looking at it, it cuts off right in a weird spot
Okay.
right out there, as far as, we would only see part of you if you move fast forward and.
that
like,
could
you know,
be
you'd
Jason,
like a
that could be a
floating
Jason
head.
Ingles question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as, if there's space for 4 or 5 people
And if they can
that
line
want to
in the
come,
hallway.
I think what you do is
first
a-
comers,
if they're here, let
I
them-
will support, I would be in, that would
If they're here, let
work
them
for
line in the
me.
hallway, because I know, I have seen with some of the council meetings, some of the department heads will depart. Typically, our administrators stay for the meeting. A lot of times, there may be questions that they can answer, or
Later on,
items that
yeah.
pertain to them, but with 11 chairs, if you're talking 7 or 8, you still got 4 or 5 chairs in here. Okay. Okay, let me talk to Chief, city manager, and see what they've got specifically for protocols, and we
Great.
can replicate those.
Sounds good. And can we change the meetings all to 6 o'clock?
Like, is there any reason to not? Like, I
You know,
was
I'm
wondering-
looking out at the end of the table because, just a quick history lesson for you guys, when the first policies were done, you had regular meetings scheduled every 2 weeks, which
That's right.
was too many formal meetings, not enough
So
business
an
to be done.
actual board meeting was every.
So
2
what that board opted to do back at that point in time was schedule the 4th Tuesday as a workshop, so you could have conversations like you're having now. It wasn't a vote, but conversations, and those were very beneficial. And I'm not sure why we went for 6 o'clock on
I
those.
think the thinking was that in order to allow more people to be able to attend the regular school board meeting, looking at the start of the city council meetings at 7 o'clock, and
Yeah, works
6:30 is only half an hour sooner than that, because a lot of people work until 5:30, 6 o'clock, and they have to commute back to Ellsworth, so it felt, I think the thinking was that it would give more people an opportunity to attend the meeting. So workshops, which typically were not so well attended by the public, we figured we could start those at 6 because it gave all the school board members and anyone else attending an opportunity to just show up at the end of, get there and get the meeting completed sooner.
So would it make sense, because I would agree, I think the 6:30 piece is probably better for a meeting that gives more people a chance to
Yeah.
attend. You want to make the workshops 6:30?
So I have just so the flip side of that with school board, like people that would attend are parents typically, and want to get home and put their kids to bed.
Yeah.
So there is,
Yeah, there's a-
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the assumption we made may have been incorrect.
Yep.
But, for purely selfish reasons, I would love the meetings to start sooner rather than later because I'm
Yep.
a person who gets up pretty early in the morning, and when
Right.
the meetings go late, it can be
Yeah.
a struggle for me to
Yeah.
just muster the energy to stay up, but.
Yeah. No,
Not
I
that I've ever
agree.
fallen asleep here, but,
And lately, just due to the nature of the year.
Yeah.
Our
Mhm.
meetings have gone
Longer.
longer. So starting even a half an hour earlier
Yeah.
on our regular.
Your policy does specify 6:30.
Yeah.
So that was done back when Jack was here, working with the first policy
Yeah.
committee. So if that is something that the board wants to do, is change it to 6, or workshops, I don't see anything that says when you have to. It doesn't. Workshops and informational meetings, you can schedule whenever you want.
right. So to change the regular school board meeting time, we would have to change the policy, which would mean a first read and a second read.
Well, policy committee is actually meeting tomorrow night, and I don't know, I know there are some policies out of section B. Abby, Beth, do you recall if BE was one of them? If not, you could always put it on.
Yeah, make it, it's. make
'Cause
it
you
easy
could at least
for
get a
the-
first read and have that conversation
Yeah.
about changing it from 6:30 to 6 if you want to.
Let's do that.
Sounds great.
So we'll make sure BE, if it's not on the agenda for tomorrow night, ladies, we can add it. That's easy.
I do have a comment here from Mary Martell, fifth grade teacher and EEA president, who did say, as the EEA president, I would like to be able to attend on behalf of the teachers in Ellsworth for, as far as the attending of the school board meeting. So I think from the sounds of things, Dan, you're gonna check with the,
Yeah, Gonna see how.
See how it
City
lines
Manager,
up.
Mosier is doing that with council meetings and try to replicate that. And I would presume it would need to be some sort of a notification piece that I would like to come tonight. And I think you need to make sure that it is equitable, so that anybody that wants a chance has the equal chance to come.
Well, and I think if they have the opportunity, maybe that policy, or not policy, but the protocol might be, if you speak and you don't have anything else to comment on the agenda, you can,
Leave, yeah.
leave and the next person.
Should depart and someone else can come in.
Yeah,
Yep.
we'll have
Had-
to,
If we had a waiting line.
if we
Right,
had a
right.
waiting line, which may
I'm
not
not
happen.
anticipating.
I agree. So I don't think we really necessarily need to vote on this then. We're gonna,
I think the only thing that would
Pass this
require a
back
vote
to-
is going to be that policy. If the policy committee says, let's go to 6 o'clock,
Yeah.
you do a first read, which you can do next week, second read, which you do the next one, and then all of a sudden, voila, your meetings are at. Actually, you could even do it before that, because the school board will hold its regular business meetings once a month on the second Tuesday at 6:30, unless otherwise set by action of the school board.
Okay.
So that is something that can be done.
Right, tonight's a
That's good.
regular school board meeting.
What's that?
For example, tonight, we're having a regular school board meeting.
and we started at 6, but it was because it was a special,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
so.
As
So
a
it
new
could be
board
the
member,
vote.
I
Yes, we
I do
could.
say that
That's-
the
yeah.
consistency would be very helpful for me, so that I'm like on track with because I'm constantly
Is it
like,
6?
okay,
Is it
which,
6:30?
is this a 6:30 or is this a 6? So it's inevitable that I'm either gonna be a half an hour late or a half an hour early to one of these.
So.
I can
here's-
understand
Here's
that.
something that you could do, because you did put an item on the agenda to discuss location of meetings. Even though you're not doing anything with that, you're talking about this topic. So if somebody wanted to make a motion for the December 8th meeting to start at 6 o'clock instead of 6:30, that would be consistent with the current policy. Doesn't put any time pressure on your policy committee to move that meeting next week to 6 o'clock. Somebody could do that if they wanted to.
I will do that.
I'll entertain that. Anybody?
I make a motion to move our December 8th meeting to 6 o'clock.
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
That looks unanimous.
I vote.
Yay.
I do have one more public comment question from Chris Popper. He says, "Good evening, congratulations on a great meeting and voting to allow winter sports. I did receive a courtesy phone call from Josh Frost today, letting me know that I would not be allowed to broadcast Ellsworth basketball games from the Katsiafikis Gymnasium in the winter. When I asked why, he explained that Superintendent Higgins was not allowing anyone from outside the Ellsworth school community into the gym outside of officials of the opposing team. While I certainly respect that, let me offer the following. The MPA guidelines allow for press in the building, provided I am feeling well. I would be masked at all times. I would not be in contact with any students or coach. If I was not feeling well, I would not broadcast a game. Walking into the gym, I would be on the far side of the floor away from the players and coaches. I was allowed to broadcast soccer games and did so in the garage of Ellsworth High School. I broadcast games at Hampden Academy and MDI High School in the fall. Where I normally would sit is 20 to 25-ish rows from the playing floor. I would think that you would want to have commentary on the YouTube broadcast, especially where fans are not allowed to go to the games. I would certainly welcome a discussion about this and would welcome your comments."
I'd like to clarify how that was communicated.
Sure.
We did have that conversation, and Chris, who was a friend to all schools, and particularly our school, and I'm sure he's watching right now, so hello, Chris. We did have that conversation because you're not only talking about Chris as a broadcaster, you're also talking about other media that would come in. When you look at the guidelines and you look at what we have in place for our schools, okay, we have not been allowing any members of the public in our schools, volunteers or otherwise. We are going to be live streaming. One of the things that we had talked about was whether or not, and we haven't had a conversation with Chris about this, whether or not, as you see some of the professional sports do, there could be commentary done in concert with the YouTube broadcast, so you'd have both for people that are watching. It's nothing specific with Chris, it's specific with being consistent in not allowing any members of the public into the buildings. The only people that are coming into the buildings will be people who are paid. For example, at our games, we have people who work with the scorebooks or the score clock who come in. They're paid, that's like a substitute teacher. Those are the people that we talked about at the administrative conversations of allowing into the gyms. Certainly, we all did say it would be more beneficial to have that commentary, but we thought in being consistent. So that's a conversation we had at the administrative level. Dan, you were part of that conversation. Am I portraying that accurately, or?
Yeah.
So,
That's interesting, because it certainly takes an aspect away from Ellsworth basketball as I know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Well,
As
but
I
we also-
listen to WDEA
Yeah,
when I
it's
listen
gonna
to the
be- it's
game.
about-
well, yeah, well, there's another reason for that, Jen, we know, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
My dad was also.
Full disclaimer, Tug was a great announcer. But,
He's
you
really
know, the
good
other thing is,
announcer.
Chris mentioned the fall. The fall is different. You were outside.
Yeah.
So let me just ask, so typically, I mean, how many people of the media come to high school basketball games?
Depending upon the game, Kelly, we've had in the past, you've always got the Ellsworth American there. You might get somebody from the Bangor Daily. Chris is always there unless he's being turncoat and going to MDI. Chris, I know you're watching. Take that from whence it comes. But we also have had many times, on some nights,
TV.
Fox 22 Bangor.
Yeah.
Okay,
WABI.
okay.
And News Center doesn't do as much in Eastern Maine anymore, but there have been nights that we've had that many there.
Okay, so at the most 7. So we're gonna have a giant empty gym.
Yep.
So what, I don't know, I feel like, what is the harm? They're obviously going to be much further apart than 6 feet.
The basis comes down to, and again, I think either Chris heard it wrong or it was communicated wrong. It's the consistency with not allowing members of the public into the building, into the cohort that you have for the events that you have. We haven't done it all year long. The only people from outside that have been allowed in would be vendors who work on our heating system, or someone that has to do work on the school or something like that. We have not allowed any other members of the public in, period. So
I
that's where the conversation came from. It's
No.
not trying to keep Chris out. Look,
Right. No.
if you know me at all, you know Chris and I have a great relationship. He's been a friend of the school. He's put a lot of good information out for us.
I see him as being as valuable as the person keeping score. I feel like, yes, he may not be a paid employee, but he is extremely valuable and relevant to not only the sports experience in a normal year, but 10 times so when you're depending on that broadcast. And I think I understand with consistency, but I have no problem breaking that consistency for just him and saying, as a
I'll-
board,
I'll
I
say-
would vote to
I'll say
only
this.
allow
I'll
him.
say this. I'll say this because this is an administrative decision. If the board will be supportive of, Chris following every protocol that we request our students and staff to follow to come into the gym, which I know he will. I mean,
Right.
that's not a
Right.
question here. As long as there's support from the board if somebody complains about it.
Well,
And would you,
Send him my way.
Dan, would you also be supportive of allowing other media
That's
representatives?
the piece that gives me cause for concern.
I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing is as far as like media versus Chris being there as a commentator goes, is that like Chris isn't there, wouldn't necessarily be there to get video or take pictures. He would be there to do the commentating, and whereas other members of the media would be coming in to
do
snap
a
a picture,
story.
here I am, I'm
Right.
doing a story, I'm here for 15 minutes and then I'm leaving. So the difference would be, it's almost like Chris is almost doing a public service at the same time for the
Right.
people who are watching the stuff on the YouTube channel. So I do think, at least for me personally, I do think I would be willing to say that I would support you, Dan, if that was what the administration decided to allow.
I think a case can be made that all the representatives of the other media as well are doing a public service, and and I'm a big fan of Chris Popper as well, and I know he does great things for, as Dan said, not only our school, but all the schools in the community, but I'd be uncomfortable making an exception for just one member of the media and not representatives from others.
I am
So
too.
a broadcaster of our events.
Right.
As a broadcaster of our events.
Yeah.
And I think that's an easy way to clarify it for any additional media to come in, that if you're not a broadcaster of our event, then we're just
Yep.
not allowing entry.
Chris did also just email and say that if we'd like to pay him, he would be okay with that. He would be happy to accept that.
That was
Chris,
If he has to be a paid employee.
Chris, if you're watching, CRF funds do not cover that cost.
Clearly he is
Chris, I'll give you a
watching.
call tomorrow and we can talk about details.
Yeah, I would be
How do
comfortable
you
with
feel
that.
about substitute teaching?
Right? Right?
Do you have a bus driver's license?
I think that would be really nice. I really
do
do. I gotta tell you, I do watch a lot of the live streaming, but I would really miss listening to it on WGEA.
I mean,
'cause
especially
we-
when you don't have any applause or.
Right.
I think that's a
Yeah.
good compromise, and again,
Yeah.
just so people know, it was not easy to say, and you can ask Dan, it was not easy for me to say, no, we can't do it.
I know, yeah, I understand.
And that's the reason why, and please understand that, but no,
Yeah.
based on this conversation, Mr. Popper, you'll be hearing from me tomorrow.
Wonderful.
Not an interview, Chris, but we can talk on the phone.
Did you want to add something else, Paul?
Unless he can drive a bus.
Yeah.
That's right,
True.
true. Yeah, that's great. All right, so I think we can move on. And I've written over it, so I can't see what number, oh, here we are. Item G, calendar and announcements.
Yeah, Which your policy committee is meeting tomorrow night at 6, so that is consistent with your start times.
Yeah.
It's a Zoom meeting. Abby, Beth, you'll get a Zoom invitation tomorrow.
Yep,
And that will be at the top of your inbox. And your next school board meeting is December 8th. That will be at 6 o'clock based upon your action, not 6:30. Right here in council chambers. And as the next couple of weeks go by, the other standing committees, looking for a way to find time that works for all of us to get those committees together to talk about committee
Yes.
charges. And in some cases, there may be some things that you can do even better.
right.
So facilities transportation is Who,
Abby
right?
and I.
Facilities, yes.
That's Abby and I as well.
I wasn't
you-
prepared to refresh this.
You may get an email for another meeting. Who knows, maybe tomorrow night if we find out there's a bus available.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Personnel, that's Paul and.
Kelly.
I think I'm echoing, sorry. Paul and Kelly, I'm waiting to get a communication back, so there may be an opportunity to meet, not just to go over a committee charge, but have a conversation on something, so
Sounds good.
we'll keep going.
All right, so, and just so we're clear for the public, we are going to be adjourning this meeting and then entering into a workshop. We will be taking a brief pause so we can reset to the next video. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Having no further business, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I second that.
All righty. All those in favor?